Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Colma. I'm the head of programs and communications here at International House. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's Kent Lecture featuring Spencer Paysinger. iHouse has hosted the Kent Lecture many times in the past, and we're happy to welcome it back again this year. Today's program is one of many held annually by International House as part of our Global Voices Performing Arts and Lecture Series programming. The Global Voices Lecture Series hosts prominent speakers, roundtable discussions, and special conferences and seminars. As part of this programming series, leading figures from the world stage come to share their thoughts and exchange ideas with students and members of Chicago's civic community on major issues facing the country and the world. Tonight's program fits perfectly with the Global Voices description and the mission of the Kent Lecture. From the day International House opened its doors over 91 years ago, our mission has been to promote cross-cultural understanding, mutual respect, and friendship amongst international students, scholars, and the community. That mission is made manifest through programs like tonight's, and that mission guides the work of the 15 other international houses around the world. If you already know iHouse, welcome back. If you're new to iHouse, we hope that you'll keep coming back. You can learn more about our programming on our website by following us on social media, by checking out the QR codes that are out in the hallway, and we look forward to having you back. A few quick thank yous before we dive into the content of the program. I want to thank the iHouse team, Jocelyn and our many interns who have helped to put this together and are working here tonight. I want to thank Calissa and Taylor and our wonderful partners at OBS. I want to thank you all again for being here with us, and most especially, and he'll be introduced in just a moment, I want to thank Spencer for joining us tonight. And now I have the pleasure of turning the podium over to Calissa and Taylor for their remarks and to lead the conversation. Thank you all.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Calissa, and I'm one of the 2023-2024 co-political chairs for the Organization of Black Students, more widely referred to as OBS. My co-political chair, Taylor, and I would like to welcome you all to the annual George E. Kent Lecture, where tonight we will discuss the American dream and its intersection with race and class with our speaker, Spencer Paysinger, who we will introduce in just a moment. The purpose of the Organization of Black Students at the University of Chicago is to provide an organizational framework to address issues of concern to the Black community on campus at large. As much as we are a social organization, we are also a political and educational one, as OBS serves to be a place of support that protects and uplifts its Black students in many aspects of their development. One of the ways in which we achieve this goal of serving our community is through the annual Dr. George E. Kent Lecture. This lecture is held in the honor of the late George E. Kent, one of the first Black professors to earn tenure at the University of Chicago. In continuing this tradition, OBS is beyond enthused to introduce Spencer Paysinger as our 2024 Kent Lecture guest.
Mr. Paysinger is a man of many achievements. Known for his time with the New York Giants, he played a key role in their 2012 Super Bowl victory. Post-football, Paysinger ventured into the entertainment industry, notably contributing to the TV series All-American, which is inspired by his own life. In addition to his accomplishments in football and entertainment, Spencer Paysinger is actively involved in giving back to his community through various philanthropic efforts. Despite his numerous accolades, Spencer Paysinger maintains strong ties to South Los Angeles and has faced significant hardships in his journey to success. His story reflects resilience and a commitment to overcoming challenges, which we will soon discuss further. It is an honor to welcome Spencer Paysinger to the University of Chicago and Chicago Southside. Please join me in giving a round of applause and extending a warm welcome to our 2024 Kent Lecture speaker, Spencer Paysinger.
How you guys doing today? Oh, I forgot this was on.
Okay, so to begin, for those who don't know Spencer Paysinger grew up in South Central Los Angeles and went to Beverly Hills High School. So our first question for this discussion is, how did you deal with the challenges transitioning from South Central Los Angeles, which has many stereotypes similar to the stereotype south side of Chicago faces? How did you overcome these challenges, and how has it shaped your life thus far?
Yeah, great question. Have you guys seen like Boys in the Hood and Straight Outta Compton and those, like, all those movies, I kid you not, were literally filmed like blocks away from my house. So like, I can go and walk to those houses that the main characters lived in, and it's a surreal feeling because, you know, growing up in South Central, and I would assume your perception of South Central is a lot of drugs, violence, gangs, like just kind of desolate. Where I'm here to tell you, no pun intended, I had an all-American upbringing. You know, I was riding bikes in my neighborhood. It was sort of my block versus the next block over. The local park was, you're playing with the same group of kids from like 3 years old to 12 years old. And you didn't really know like you were poor by today's standards because everybody that you mingled with was of the same socioeconomic standard. So it's like, you know, there are days where you come home and like the cable's not on and you're like, okay, I guess we're watching tapes or we're playing video games, or, you know, some days where the hot water's not on, it's like, all right, well, I'm 35 years old now. I actually like taking cold showers. I think it's because sometimes the water was out. But I never grew up thinking like, I'm poor, I don't have as much or anything. It was, this is what we're presented with today. You know, I'm going to make the most of it. So kind of going back to your question of going to Beverly Hills High School and understanding what that did and didn't do for me. Looking back on it, I always say going into that environment was arguably the first best decision that my parents ever did for me. I mean, they probably have tons more, but it allowed me at 13 years old, 14 years old to be dropped off in such a diverse cultural melting pot that I kind of had to sink or swim. You know, coming from South Central, going to school in Inglewood, it was primarily Black and Latino from literally K through 8th grade. And going to Beverly, I really had to make that decision of, am I just going to link up with the people that look like me, or am I going to essentially broaden my horizons and talk to my now friends that are from the Jewish community, you know, talk to people that are, you know, from the Asian community, and understanding like, what are they going through being 13, 14, 15, and whatever so years old. So at a very young age, it allowed me to understand that we are not just our skin color, and that we're actually all going through a lot of the similar things, because at that time we were all teenagers just trying to figure out life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that, especially for being somebody from like the South Side of Chicago that's kind of faced the same kind of stereotypes, especially, you know, switching environments and exploring further parts of Chicago. But on a different note, we read that you have played multiple sports in your younger years, but ultimately decided that football was like what you were going to stick to when going to high school because of like the opportunities that it provided. Mm-hmm. We would like to just have you like explain further, you know, what exactly led to you making this decision and like the importance that football has in your life.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be a little long-winded with this answer, because it goes back to, and I'm gonna kind of like allow for the truth of All American to come through with this. If you guys have all watched All American, thank you guys for doing that. We're currently in our 6th season. We will premiere season 6 in April, and are writing All American Homecoming right now as well. But welcome. But the decision to play football didn't start when I stepped onto campus, you know, September 2002. It actually started in September 1971. So my uncle, who Billy Baker, Taye Diggs' character is loosely based off of, he was actually the first person of my family to integrate, part of the second class to integrate Beverly Hills High School back in the 70s. My grandmother raised him, my dad, and their other two brothers in the same house that I grew up in off of Slauson and Western, right in the heart of South Central. And they were going to a school called Emerson Middle School. Now, in 1969, the students of Beverly Hills High School, mind you, this is the 60s, so this is like free love and, you know, equality and what have you. They actually petitioned the school board with the only black teacher at Beverly Hills to integrate the school. So for about a year and a half after that, the school board was looking for neighborhoods that harbored black youth that had a similar socioeconomic standard. And the only area was, you know, Leimert Park, View Park, Windsor Hills, which is sort of like the mecca of black life in Los Angeles. Now, it just so happened, we didn't live in that neighborhood. We actually lived just right down the street. But because my grandmother was sending her kids to school in that same neighborhood, it allowed for us to be able to, or allowed for my uncle to be able to get on the list to potentially be the second class to integrate Beverly Hills High School. So fast forward to the 80s, he comes back, like, so him and my dad and all their brothers, they go through Beverly Hills High School. My mom and all her sisters and brothers actually went to Crenshaw High School, so it's weird that All American is a show about Beverly Hills and Crenshaw. But during the 80s and 90s, my dad and two of my uncles came back to coach Beverly Hills High School. So the real story of All American was, I was a ball boy at Beverly when I was like 4 years old. And although I still lived in South Central, every Friday afternoon, my grandmother would pick me up and we'd drive out to Beverly because I would literally be the ball boy for them, running balls to the referee and back. My grandparents did the concession stands, and it was just sort of this family atmosphere. So I actually always knew I had to go to Beverly. Now, when it comes to the decision, and kind of like repeat the question because I know I'm getting long-winded with it. What was the full question again? The last part of it? Sorry, guys. I'm long-winded. You guys want to deal with this today.
Essentially, could you just elaborate, like, how you came to kind of decide on football and like the importance?
I came from a football family. My dad and his brothers coached football. My older brother played football, and my older brother's personified as Darnell in the show. I actually wanted to play basketball growing up. I thought I was going to be a two-guard at UNC and run and gun with Kobe for a couple years, and that's just what I thought my life was. So every day after school, it was me being in the backyard, like getting up shots, because although I came from a football family, I always thought I was going to be a left turn. Now, I entered Beverly Hills at, again, September 2002, and I truly feel like young black and brown kids have to make life decisions at an earlier age than anybody else in our country. So I'm looking at the basketball team, and I'm like, I really want to play basketball. It's my favorite sport. I think about it. I dream about it. I have playing cards and posters all over my room, but the basketball team is only sending 2 guys D1 every couple years, whereas our football team was sending guys D1, 4 or 5 guys D1 every single year. So it was like, you know, Cat Williams said, you gotta make a player decision. It was literally making that decision to go, okay, I'm going to play football now because football can get me to the next level. My parents didn't have the ends to send me to a university of my choice. I knew for a fact I had to get a scholarship. So it was at 13 years old making that decision that I can increase my chances of getting a scholarship if I go the football route. And yeah, the rest is history.
I do really appreciate that answer. I think a lot of people in the audience may be able to relate if they're Odyssey scholars on scholarships here. I know personally, for me, college was either I have a scholarship or I don't go. But anyways, to our next question, I wanted to ask how, and you kind of explained a little bit already, but how do the plot lines and characters in All-American reflect your real life experiences?
Yeah, there's a lot of plot lines within All-American that affect my real life, and some that we just took creative liberty with. You know, for anybody that aspires to get into TV and film, nothing you've ever seen on TV happened exactly how you think it happened, or happened exactly the way it happened. No matter how close you try to get to the truth will always be one step further than what you see on TV. So specifically, even in the first season, you know, there are certain storylines where in the second episode, you know, Spencer and I'm just calling Michael because I just see him in my head as Michael Evans Bailey now. they get pulled over and they get pretty much thrown onto the concrete, handcuffed, and there was a big discussion about Spencer telling Billy why he never had that conversation with his son. That actually happened in real life, you know, and just even in the process of how we are able to cultivate stories, the process of the writer's room is I'll sit in the writer's room with the 10 writers that we have on the show, and we'll just talk through stories. If a new season's coming up, you know, Spencer, what did you go through throughout your freshman year of college? What did you go through when you did get injured? What did you go through, et cetera, to the point where I'll give them a story, we'll discuss it, and then we'll try to figure out the best way for it to implement within the world, because at the end of the day, like, Spencer James is a different person than Spencer Paysinger. And it was weird because for a while there, I realized Spencer James was changing my history. So then in my head, I started thinking like, wait, is my history not good enough as is? Like, why do we need to change it in these certain ways when I believe my history is good enough to be on TV? Mm-hmm. So that came from me just being young in this industry, not knowing how story structure works, to the point where now I'm very comfortable telling my stories and us changing it in the many different ways that we've had. But when it comes to deciding what stories we want to put in and what stories are true and what stories are not, I do always end it with just enjoy the ride, enjoy the show. You know, I don't ever want to walk into a movie theater and somebody's walking out like, well, you know, he died at the end. You know, like we want to enjoy the ride. So when it comes to deciding what stories you like to put in or what stories are true and not true and whatever, again, I always lean on just enjoying the ride of it.
That was really the point about like telling, you know, what's your real history. I find that really important, especially for Black people, just because oftentimes in the past and still currently our history is often, you know, erased. So I find, you know, you making that point and making a point to do that, I find that really important. So thank you.
Well, if I can, you do have to fight for the stories that you want to be told. Mm-hmm. You also have to make that decision of what stories are you okay with allowing some creative license to be had. You know, one of the most, the question I get asked all the time, two of them is my current wife in the show? You know, I met my current wife in high school. You know, she was one of my closest friends in high school. I'll let you guys decide who is it. I'm never going to answer it, but again, enjoy the ride. Another question is, you know, did I actually get shot? You know, and this kind of goes into how we decide to take things from my real life and put them into the show. Spencer getting shot, I think it was in season 4, the show, season 3, I want to say, came from me taking a hit in the NFL where my right arm went numb for 2 weeks. And even still to this day, these 2 fingers are different because part of my right arm, the nerve that runs down here, is still a little damaged. So the inflection point of Spencer getting shot versus the real Spencer taking a hit, we decided to have some creative license to that. But what was real that came after that was the rehab and the way it changed how I played the game afterwards. And the storyline after Spencer getting shot and coming back from that rehab was he was messed up mentally because he didn't know if he could still be the same player that he was after having that traumatic event, which is exactly what happened to me during that time. So just goes back to how we're able to craft and put the stories within All American in unique ways.
This would be more of a small follow-up question, but could you explain a little more how getting injured changed your football career and how you played, like you just mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, getting injured, and I know we had your question, but come back to it, my bad. Getting injured while watching friends and teammates get injured, as well as one of my closest friends, I would say my closest friend in the NFL actually passed away due to a complication from an injury he sustained in the NFL. It changes your play because you realize you're mortal. You realize that you have been taught and bred by coaches that all believe in the same sort of structure of the ideology of sport and football and American culture, that you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to second guess yourself, you're not supposed to do anything but the assignment at hand. Now, when I'm 22 entering the league, I'll run through that brick wall right there. When I'm 28, 29 in the league, I'm sizing up the wall, like asking questions like, do I really want to do that, you know? And you evolve in the game because I was so fortunate enough to play as long as I did. When you see injuries that I've seen, when you see it affect people's lives, how I've seen it, you can't see what happens with that and still go out and hit that wall as fast as you can. It's a traumatic experience where, you know, I'm on the phone with again, my close friend who passed away to a NFL complication, and she's crying, tears in her eyes, begging me to walk away from the game. And I still played 2 years more after that. But I kid you not, every time I stepped into the field, her voice is in the back of my head because I could be her son at any point, at any play. So it absolutely changes how you play.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. On to the next question. As someone with a background in sports and education, do you see any unique opportunities for addressing racial bias and inclusivity within these domains?
I think when it comes to sport, the American sports complex is already a juggernaut. It is, that's why I don't like to, I think we were talking about this in the back, I don't like to do football camps. I don't like to do anything that presents me as this is just a football player that's coming to talk, to come to teach you how to play football, because I feel like I can give the world just a little bit more than just being a football player out here. You know, if a young kid wants to play football, that complex is already paved in gold for them to attempt to make it to the NFL. There's trainers, there's nutritionists, there's coaches, their parents, whatnot, are going to guide you down a path that's already been lined to get you where you need to go. The trouble is getting those same parents and coaches and teachers to understand that these kids can be so much more off the field than just sending them down the same pipeline that previous generations have been through. So when I think about like sort of the racial equalities that come up in sport, it's kind of in Black people's favor to go down that road, because all sports are 80%, 90% Black athletes. Mm. Now, when it comes to education, to me, it all goes back to community. You know, I think when it comes to education, like I have 2 kids, they're brilliant, hello Cairo, hello Madden. If I did not have the community that I'm actively building out around them, who knows what would happen with them? You know, I think when it comes to educational opportunities in both our city and our country, it has to come back to allowing the community to have some say-so in how we're parenting, how we're raising, how we're pouring into our kids. Now, it doesn't have to be every kid needs to go to a private school, but those local businesses that are around the school, can they sponsor something? Can they do something? Can we take our kids and show them the business around the neighborhood that's helping prop up the neighborhood? I think for specifically Black and brown youth, like, we're so busy being the product of an environment that we need to get into being like part of the system, you know, changing the system that pumps out right now, not a bad product, but a product that can be elevated. So I hope I answered your question, but yes.
So with that, before you said there's definitely a lot more to life than one path, just being football. Mm-hmm. So my next question is kind of, we read this quote that you said in a different interview saying that you didn't want football to be your highest peak. I kind of wanted you to elaborate that or explain it more, because I think it's very important for people to hear that the path that they're set on now doesn't have to strictly be their path for their entire life.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for finding that quote. I mean, I grew up I was overweight as a kid. I had glasses. I couldn't breathe out of my nose. I've had 4 nose surgeries to correct it. I was an art kid. You know, I was part of the science club. I was like a mathlete, but I also played football. So at a very young age, and this is a credit to my parents and my family as a whole, is I came from a sports family, but at no point did I ever feel like I was forced down that road. You know, I've won art competitions, you know, as an artist growing up. So it was my mom saying, oh, he's interested in art, let me go get him some color pencils. Let me go get him a canvas. Let me go get him some pastels. Like, let's pour into all the different interests that he likes to do. Football just happened to be one of them. So, you know, going through college and then the NFL, I always kept up that mentality of what else can I do off the field? You know, at Oregon, doing a bunch of internships, job shadowing experiences where, you know, some of my other teammates were like, I'm on the football team. That's all I need to do because that's going to get me where I want to go. Whereas I never wanted to, I don't know if you guys ever seen like a football player's resume that comes out. It's like 7 different ways of saying you played on a football team. It's like a leader of a group that helped tackle adversity. And then the next line is like, I collaborated with 100 other people. I'm like, you're just saying you played on the football team, man. I just never wanted that to be my resume. So just kind of having this like exploratory brain of wondering what else is out there in the world has always led me down just these random intricate paths to where, I mean, the reason why I'm sitting here with you guys today is because All-American was a hobby. It was literally a hobby that I was teaching myself how to screenwrite while still playing in the NFL. And it was the only thing that would essentially bring down my adrenaline levels after a big game. You know, we're flying back from a game, everybody's like drinking Hennessy and playing dominoes and playing cards. I'm like, I'm writing something because I needed to get my brain out of that world. I needed to bring down my adrenaline levels. So it's always come from almost a like inherent necessity for me to find other peaks out there. Now, when I say football, I didn't want it to be my highest high because I was fortunate enough to play until I was 29 years old. My goal was to play until I was 30 and walk away. I retired, I think, 6 months before my 30th birthday. So I effectively achieved that dream. But I was only 29. If I'm 72, 75, 80, hopefully 90 one day, and I'm still talking about something I did 70 years ago as like my thing, I've wasted 50 years of my life.
Yeah.
So yes, football was what it was, and it is something just in America of like, if you get there, you're good. That just wasn't enough for me. Like, I will always attempt to try to do something else, even with All-American. Like, All-American is going to be on my obituary. In 50, 60, 70 years, like, you guys are going to read in the paper, Spencer Paysinger has died. Inspiration behind All-American. If it stops right there, I failed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Just to touch on like the topic of All-American, how do you define the American dream? And how might you feel your life kind of reflects that or challenges that idea?
Oh man, I think to define the American dream now versus 10, 20 or so years ago, I think we're in a really great time in America. I know it sounds crazy to say this, that we're in a good time in America because like so much crazy stuff is happening, but I think all this crazy stuff is happening because the old systems that have chugged this thing along for so long are running out of gas. Like there's so many systems and structures and eras coming to an end that's why you feel all this friction happening because people don't really know what's coming next. Mm-hmm. Part from that is also the idea of the American dream being up to be revised. Like I think for decades, the American dream was essentially a byproduct of capitalism. It was work, 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 retire, live off of the money that you have from all that work. I think now in, hopefully my generation and your generation, we can include a little bit of self in that. We can include a little bit of what we're talking about vulnerability in the back, about including not just the idea of let me accumulate, let me amass something, let me grab a bunch of stuff and say this is the American dream based off of how much stuff I have. I think once we bring in the idea of self, the idea of others, and figure out how we build this together, that's how we're able to redefine the American dream. For me, the American dream is I want to be able to, raise my kids in a happy, healthy home, support my wife in any way that she needs it, get off any fun, kooky projects that I want to be able to do, and still be able to walk down the street as a relative unknown. I know, you guys maybe, who are your idols right now? For me, it was Kobe and Jordan and, those guys. All right, who is that for you guys right now? Who's top of the top? LeBron James, Beyonce. When's the last time you see Beyonce just walking down the street? I love, trust me, I love Beyonce. I respect Beyonce, LeBron, all them. The life that they live, although it's lavish and everything, I don't know if I want that. I really don't know if I want that. I would much rather be behind the camera doing what I want to do and being able to walk across the street and still be a relative unknown to anybody that's never seen my work. So if I could define the American dream, it would be that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That was super insightful. Yeah.
Okay, I know a lot of people in the audience are Odyssey Scholars, which is our scholarship financial aid type of program. And a lot of us definitely experience a form of survivor's guilt coming from these low-income backgrounds, being at this high institution, especially given some of the history this institution has with Chicago's South Side, which is communities similar to the backgrounds that a lot of us probably came from.
Yeah.
So my next question is, do you experience or have you experienced any form of survivor's guilt? How did you overcome this, or how do you still deal with it?
Yeah, I still deal with it. Because it's the age-old question of why me? Why did all these decisions fall in my favor? I have friends that I played youth sports with that are no longer alive. That were bigger, stronger, faster, in every metric better than me. I'll never sit here and tell you I was the fastest linebacker, I was the strongest, I was the smartest. I'll never tell you any of those things because I just simply wasn't. So I definitely still deal with how did all this bounce in my favor at the end of it? I'm even sitting right here talking to you guys. This is very weird for me right now. But when I think back on that, it's just I think about my grandparents. I think about, on both sides of my family, I think about just the idea of the Great Migration. My grandparents on both sides migrated from the South. And to think that, my dad's side migrated from Plain Dealing, Louisiana, about 45 minutes outside of Shreveport. My mom's side migrated from Pass Christian, Mississippi. And when I think about their ancestors and the ancestors I don't know, I'm how could I stop doing what I'm doing out of some sense of guilt? I feel like I would be letting them down. I remember my grandmother picking me up from school and getting me a little McDonald's lunch on the way to wherever, and seeing all the hard work that she did, seeing all the hard work that my grandfather did. My grandfather passed away in 2020, I believe. My grandfather wore the same work shoes every single day, just doing work around the house. And they're old, they're beat up, they probably cost him $10. He has duct tape around them and everything. They're dirty. They're just if I picked them up now, they would disintegrate. But when he passed away, I remember telling my brothers, I was yo, I need his shoes. I need those shoes. And right now, they're sitting on a shelf in a glass case in my office. And it's just a reminder to whatever guilt I have is not more than what they went through. It's not, it pales in comparison to what my grandfather had to deal with. I recently went to the house that he grew up in Plain Dealing, Louisiana, and luckily our family still owns the land. It's about 30 acres out there. There's nothing there. It's overrun. It's, you know, the whole thing, but the house is kind of caving into itself now. Just not livable at all. And as soon as I'm by myself, I took a car there. I mean, I rented a car, drove there. I wanted to feel the land, you know? Kid you not, as soon as I stepped out, I just started bawling, crying. Because, like, there was an energy there that, like, my ancestors were there. They were almost waiting for me to come back there. So having that experience and then thinking about a why me, like, it just pales in comparison. Like, if anything, I have to keep going.
Yeah. Thank you. That was very insightful.
So one last final question. What message would you like to convey to the young people facing adversity now, particularly who aspire to kind of overcome these challenges and achieve success?
Yeah, man. I would say, like, you guys are all in such a unique point in college and in history right now. Like I said, there's so much being knocked down to only be built back up anew. But there's also, when it comes to that, there's also like a tension, a stress, a sort of like strain that comes with it. I remember being in that position. I remember being 19, 20, 21 years old. Like, I'm kind of incubated right now in school, but in a couple of years, I'm about to be kicked out into the world. And mind you, I was coming out of college during the housing market crash. So, like, it wasn't guaranteed that I was going to make it to the NFL. Like, I actually gave up by 2010 standards, a really good job out of college because I came back from my senior year to hopefully win a national championship. We ended up losing in the national championship to Cam Newton and Auburn, but that's a story for another day. But I remember feeling that stress of, like, if I don't get in somewhere now, that door is never going to open again. If I don't get that internship, if I don't get that job shadowing experience, if I don't meet this person, it's all going to crash down. And I'm here to tell you, as, like, I'm only 35. Like, there's elders here that will tell you, like, have just a little bit more grace with yourself. Like, take a deep breath, drop your shoulders a little bit. Like, that next meeting that you didn't land is not going to be the definitive meeting of your life. That next person you meet is not going to have domain over your life. It's just going to be another thing that happens in your life en route to where you're already supposed to be going. So, like, and I know I'm not, like, alleviating all that strain and stuff right now, but I hope when you guys, like, get back to your dorm or apartment or whatever, you just take that deep breath, look at yourself in the mirror, and just say, like, you're already doing what you think you need to be doing to get where you want to go. You know, I was talking with, where's he at? I was talking to my guy earlier, and he's like, oh, I want to get that job, I want to do that thing, I want to blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, do you realize you're already doing it? Do you realize you're already here tonight? You're already, like, we're mingling, we're talking right now. Like, you guys are already in it. You guys are already of it. A lot of the stress that comes, not only with you guys, but just in the human experience, is dealing with things that happened in the past, thinking about things that happened in the past, worrying about things that are going to happen in the future, and completely forgetting the fact that you are here now, living and breathing, doing what you need to do. So just have some more grace with yourself. I can't give you a 5-step process towards anything, but I can tell you, take a breath. Just take a breath.
Thank you so much for that. It's really helpful advice, especially with midterms coming up for everybody.
Oh, midterms. And study. Take a breath, but then get back to studying.
Yeah, but thank you so much.
Yeah, so that was all of our questions personally. We're now going to open up the floor for people to ask their own questions. We'll reiterate the questions up here for Mr. Paysinger. We may ask some follow-up questions ourselves. Sure. So if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask, anything. Okay. I think you raised your hand first in the back.
It's coming.
Yeah, the microphone's coming, sorry.
I'm curious, like, when the opportunity was presented for there to be a TV show about your life, whether it was something where you're immediately all in, or if you had any, like, qualms about showing something so personal in such a, like, public way.
Yeah. I absolutely hated the first draft of All-American. Like, almost like what is this, you know? Because, mind you, I was a free agent at this time, going into my 7th year, and I already told myself it was going to be my last year if I got picked up by a team. But I was fortunate enough to be able to kind of sit down with our showrunner and craft what would be the pilot for All-American. So it was a lot of long days of just, tell me about this person in your life, tell me about that person in your life, how about this, like what would happen if this happened? And it allowed me to actually go back and talk to my friends I still have today about who I was to them, you know, back when we were in high school. So there was a sort of like therapeutic release that came from that, because I realized some things about myself that I was still carrying. They saw it in me as a teenager, but being vulnerable enough to essentially give my story to somebody and be like, hey, go make something with this. It was a tough process. It was a tough process. Like the first script, you know, I wanted to like blow the whole thing up, because I'm like, we sat down for months and talked, and this is what you came up with? And there's still some stuff in the show that I don't agree with, but what I realized in that moment was, this is a way for me to learn the industry better than 99.9% of other people entering this industry. I'm able to have a TV show on the air 4 months after we were shooting the TV show 4 months after I technically retired from the NFL, and making a point to put myself back in school and come from a learning position. A lot of, and this is kind of for the athletes too out here, if any of you guys are athletes, like, you're often told that as an athlete, you have so many traits that transition off the field, that translate off the field. You can lock in, you can strain harder than anybody, you can put your blinders on, like that whole thing. But if you don't learn the language of whatever industry you're about to enter to, you're not going into that industry. So it was me putting myself in a learning position to go, this is my end to open this door. It just so happens to be a story about my life. Let me now use this to open up other doors in this space, which I'm fortunate for me, I have been able to. Like, I've had a lot of success in this industry in the short period of time that I've been here. But, you know, to say it was easy couldn't be further from the truth. Like, even my first year being completely immersed in the story and shooting it and being on set every day, there were still some writers and producers that, you know, they have their own makeup of what they think an NFL player is. So when I'm there every day, they're like, every conversation kept going back into football, because they literally could not believe that they can talk to me about anything else besides football. Like, we could be talking about anything and it will turn into a pun about something like, oh, like that must have been a touchdown for you. I'm like, dog, like, what are we doing here, you know? So it was difficult, but it was also like a challenge to go, hey, you've been in the spotlight for X amount of years of your life. Now you're in ground zero of a new industry. Are you going to sort of demand respect because you're in this position, or are you going to humble yourself and like move those soapboxes and grab some cords if somebody needs it, or go get coffee if somebody needs it? And I think I've transitioned in that way, in my opinion, pretty well.
I will ask a follow-up question, then I'll open it back up to the audience. But I was wondering, in your different like places that you've been in your life, like South Central Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, like producing a show in the NFL, what kind of racial biases have you experienced, and kind of like how are they different in all of these different environments, and I guess how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, the racial bias is there. You know, in high school, I went to a high school that was 2% black. My university was 2% black. The NFL is like 87% black, but in more recent years, people in upper management are black and or other. So it's understanding that the bias is going to be there. It's also not my job to sit you down and teach you about my culture or the innuendos that I'm coming with. It's allowing the work to speak for itself. So like one of my main ideologies is becoming undeniable. And I'm not saying you need to run the fastest, lift the most, whatever, but in the NFL, do anybody know what Black Monday is in the NFL? It's where half of the league loses their job. It's right after the last preseason game, usually the first weekend or like now it's the last weekend of August, but about like 600 to 700 people are gonna get a phone call that say, hey, you're no longer part of this team. And it's just roster cuts. So whether it was being on the Giants or being on the Dolphins and Carolina, I always made it a point to become undeniable, not race, not how much I can lift, not anything like that, where the linebacker coach, if he would look at me, could he prop me up in front of the other coaches? When they're going through that roster and they need to cut 40 people on this roster, when they come to my name, is it, we're gonna have to worry about Spencer off the field? Does Spencer have any problems off the field? Can he do his job on the field? Can he do somebody else's job? If we really need him to do somebody else's job, can we plug him in there and do it? If my coach can look at me and be like, he's not a problem off the field, you don't have to worry about that, he's actually gonna help out in the community, he can do his job, and he's able to learn 2 or 3 other positions if need be, you're not cutting that person. That's somebody you don't have to worry about. That's somebody, in my opinion, that is an undeniable player that can overall help the team. So when I'm in these different situations, be it college, NFL, even high school, and understanding that the racial bias is there, I'm from the mindset of the work has to be impeccable. It has to be impeccable. Who you are, your integrity, the work that you put out has to be impeccable to almost force them to take another look at you. Now, if the work is not as good, now you're opening the door to extra criticism. And unfortunately for us, like, we don't have the leeway with a lot of people in this country to be less than.
Thank you. Okay, Charles.
I don't necessarily need a mic. Oh, it's recorded. Okay, to give it to me. Okay, so I appreciated your answer when you were talking about the survivor's guilt and how you were saying, how could I stop? And then you also gave the advice to give ourselves some grace and take breathers. So I was wondering for you specifically, what does a work-life balance look like? When do you find that time? And I guess a larger question, I suppose, is how can others hope to do the same without fully committing to, I need to make sure that I'm giving myself enough grace, but that I'm working hard enough to get to where I want to get?
That's a great question. I think to start off, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing the things that you're doing? You know, is it to service like what you actually want to do, or is it a play to get more money? If it's a play to get more money, that's over time, that's not going to fulfill you. Like, the mentally worst year of my NFL career was the year I made the most money in my career in the NFL. It was my wife, my then girlfriend, now wife, kicking me out of bed in the morning because if she didn't nudge me, I wouldn't have got out. Like, that's just what it was. Now, when you think about the NFL, you're like, oh, like, if you do well, you're supposed to make more money. That's just it. But in the situation that I was in, which I did do well, and I was tasked with a little bit of extra responsibility with the most money I've ever made up to that point, it's the worst experience I ever had. And that really retooled my mind to go, dang, you know those people that's like, oh, I wish everybody could make as much money as possible, so then they realize like happiness doesn't have a dollar sign to it. Like, I actually experienced that. And it allowed me to retool how I wanted to be in this world and what I actually wanted to do, to the point where, you know, I'm not making nowhere near as much money as I made in the NFL, but am I doing things right now that have fulfilled me in a way that it leaps and bounds what I got from the NFL? Absolutely. So when it comes to sort of that work-life balance, just understanding that if you can service yourself in it, like your being, not yourself as like sort of capitalism, just like hoarding, but if you're able to say, I'm doing this XYZ thing because I genuinely want to see if I can do this job, if I can take that leap of faith and do this thing that maybe I've never done before. To me, that's where the grace is. That's where the fun is, because you're stretching yourself in healthy ways, not necessarily stretching yourself for $1. So and even some practices for me is meditation, yoga. I do hot yoga a couple times a week. I walk around my neighborhood in the morning. You know, I play with my kids when they get home from school. Like, even right now, like I'm wearing socks underneath these socks that have my kids' faces on them because they were like, you need to wear these tonight, you know? So it's just like, that is my work-life balance. I can't strain and not see my kids and my wife for weeks on end because I'm over here trying to get a project off. Like, you always have to be mindful of, are you servicing yourself and your own mental well-being, but also are you servicing the project at hand? Because there's balance with that. And when I say balance, I don't mean literally trying to find the 50-50, because I truly believe balance is like, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Like, anybody that can tell you they truly found balance is probably lying to you. It does not exist. It's just knowing the thing that you're doing in the moment is servicing what you wanted to serve in that moment, and then you just move on to the next thing. So, yes.
Thank you.
I'm back here.
Can you talk about your experience dealing with the writer's strike?
Oh, yeah. The writer's strike almost buckled everything. I mean, it buckled a lot. There's a lot of shows that just didn't get that chance to find life. A lot of TV shows, they really find their legs in that, like, towards the end of that second season. You know, and if they do have the grace, third season is when everybody's like hair is properly done and everybody tanned for like a year and a half. So like everybody just looks like they got just a little bit of money about themselves. So, like, the jokes are sharper and the scenes are a little bit better. A lot of good TV shows didn't get the opportunity to evolve. You know, that was something where if I wasn't working on, I did a documentary, BS High, on HBO. If I wasn't working on that, it would have got really dark for me and my team, because as a creative, you want to create, you want to like see in the ways in which you can evolve yourself and your pen game and networking and all that. It was just radio silent. So, you know, you're in the dead of summer picketing. You know, fortunate for me, like, I own a coffee shop in LA, and we were able to actually like serve free coffee and donuts to the strikers a couple times. So it was really seeing the greed that these studios have, and realizing in a couple weeks you'll be in the same room with those people and they'll be shaking your hand like, hey, like, we're really excited about this project. It's like, you tried to kill us. You tried to take like our livelihood away from us. And there's still a lot of people in a lot of shows that are still trying to just kind of catch their wind, because the top producers and writers, those guys are good. You know, they have savings, they have all that stuff, but like the PAs and the below the line people and the crew members, there's a lot of people that moved out of LA because they just they couldn't fight the good fight. But if anything, it did show me that no matter what happens, like, these unions aren't going to break. And I think it actually showed the streamers the streamers and the network studios that, to the point where when we have to go back into it in the next couple of years, they will know our current strength.
I think there's a hand back there. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Your story is so inspiring. I wanted to ask, the American dream can be somewhat problematic in that it can put the burden of bettering yourself on individuals and make them feel like if they fail, it's a problem with their own aptitude. So I wanted to ask, in the retelling of your own story, how do you balance wanting to give inspiration to individuals to be resilient, but also acknowledging things like systemic inequalities and ways in which society drives individual failure in ways they can't really control?
Yeah, and I hope my answer answers your question, but, you know, we always felt like every 7 to 10 years, there comes a show, a high school specific, I don't know why this is the case, but specifically a high school teen drama that sort of encapsulates the angst of the teenagers of that era. You know, it was Friday Night Lights, it was One Tree Hill, Gilmore Girls, 90210, those type of shows that, you know, all of us grew up, maybe not even watching, but just knowing that they were on. We felt like if we did All American the way we wanted to, we would be the next spoke in that wheel. Now, when it came to even choosing the stories that we want to tell, you know, the American dream is rooted in Spencer James's journey. You know, this is a kid from South Central Los Angeles that Crenshaw technically, that if you whittle down the entire story, it's Spencer James, receiver from Crenshaw, is trying to make it to the NFL. We don't really go beyond him saying that because making it to the NFL is the American dream that's supposed to write everything in his life. Now, what comes with that too is the fact that he is a representation of not only his neighborhood, but also the youth of today. You know, I wasn't protesting when I was in high school. I wasn't carrying some of the weight that we see Spencer James and our other characters carrying, but you guys, your generation, absolutely has exhibited that. So when we're talking about what stories we want to bring into All American, we didn't want to tell a story about, you know, a kid that went to high school 20 years ago. We want to tell a contemporary story of the things that are happening today, where, you know, George Floyd and the LGBTQAI plus community, and like we wanted to bring all that type of stuff into the TV show because we truly felt like if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be the sort of generational show that's depicting this era in the light that we believe we are doing it to. So I hope I answered that question.
We have a couple hands up here.
For any creatives or aspiring creatives in the audience, what's like the #1 piece of advice that you would give them?
It sounds kind of like bland, but like really write what you know. Like write what you know, because you can take that leap of faith and write about something that is not necessarily part of your experience, but you've done all the research and all the work to actually be able to write about that. But you know it in your heart when you feel a story is coming out of you and you need to get it down on page or on video or what have you. That's always going to be more potent to your soul than writing the thing that you can research. So I've dealt with that on sort of the plus and minus side of it, where being put in positions to talk about certain things or research certain things, and I'm like, oh, this is great. But now I'm in the dog days of doing it, and I'm like, I'd much rather be talking about this YA story kind of playing into my childhood as opposed to writing this story about space something, you know? So write what you know, but also understand the act of creating is constantly molding the clay. You have to get it out. You have to get that idea out of your head on page or on video or whatever medium you want to put it onto. Just get it out of your head, because in your head you think it's this perfect little thing that you're going to write. You're going to just throw it up on the page and it's going to come out perfect. Your first draft is going to be terrible. Don't show anybody. That's actually the advice. Don't show anybody your first draft. Like, do your first draft, put it in a drawer, save it on Google Drive for 2 weeks, and then come back to it with fresh eyes, and you'll literally laugh at some of the stuff that you wrote because you're like, that was not good, you know? But getting it out, that first thing, makes it real. Takes it from it being an idea in your head to an actual piece of clay that you can then start molding from there. So be gentle with yourself, get the idea out, and don't show anybody your first draft.
Thank you.
I also come from a sports family, and just like I understand like the level of like expectation and like community that does come with that. But how did you know that writing and like filmmaking was like the true passion?
I'll tell you a story. This was my 7th year playing. All American, we were creating what would be the pilot, like writing it, just trying out different ideas for what it would be. I remember I told you guys I hated the first draft. We were on like draft 4 at this point. So things were moving along. We made some changes in it, and I was a free agent at this time. I'm still teaching myself how to screenwrite, but also just being available to our showrunner and sitting with her and just learning sort of her skills with it. So just really immersing myself in it. But being a free agent, I was making sure that I was still like in physical shape in case a team called. So we make it to, I think, the end of November, and I'm back in Los Angeles, training in the morning, being with our writer in the afternoon, crafting the story. I get a call from the Carolina Panthers. Hey, we had some injuries on the team. We're going to try you out. If we like you, we'll keep you there. Luckily for me, the linebacker coach was the assistant linebacker coach during my time with the Giants. The special teams assistant coach was literally one of my teammates on the Giants at this point. So I came into a really good position of the coaches already knowing like what I can do, what I couldn't do, and just being able to like plug a hole in their special teams and defense. So I go through the first, I think like 2 weeks, played in both games, starting to get the hang of it. And every Wednesday is the start of the NFL week. Tuesday is technically our Saturday, our Sunday off. So that Wednesday, we go into the defensive meeting room. There's 30 football players there. I'm talking like guys that will be in the Hall of Fame one day, like Julius Peppers, Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, like these mountain of men, Our defensive coordinator is putting up the defensive install. And a Wednesday is you're putting in about 20 or 25 new defenses that day. And you have to like know the ins and outs of them and the different variations of them 2 hours later on the field. In my head, I started thinking about, oh wow, when I was back in LA as a free agent, my barber just disappeared. Just stopped coming to his barbershop. Even the people that knew him that like worked at the same barbershop just like, I don't know where he is. And as a black man, we can understand that's pretty much a horror story. Because you're like, wait, like the person that is responsible for making me look presentable in the world is just gone, and now I have to find another person to put that faith into. So I don't know what made me start thinking about it, but I was like, oh, I think this could be a short film. So in my defensive notebook, it says like Carolina Panthers on it. I start writing a short film of like, well, let's look at each barber that I went to go visit to try a new haircut as like a relationship. This is a physical relationship. I mean, this is an abusive relationship. This is a emotionless relationship. Like, I look up, and 45 minutes had passed, and our defensive coach he was on like defense number 12, and I had not written anything, and it was the worst practice I had that day. I just didn't know anything. When I looked up, and I saw the other defenses being written, and I had a moment of like fear. I was like, oh my God, like I can't believe this. Like, I'm gonna get cut. I'm not gonna be able to have a good practice and whatnot. But then this crazy sense of calm came over me because I was like, wow, I'm literally in a room full of like 30 to 45 other people, like defensive people that are all focusing all of their energy learning defense, and my mind was just somewhere else. Like, I still to this day do not know anything that happened in that room for that 45 minutes because my mind was in story. And I came out of that room, I was already thinking about like, well, this is gonna be my last year anyway, so if I get cut or whatever, like that's it, that is what it is. But as an athlete, you always think you can maybe get one more. You always know, I can play until year 8. I can do that extra stride. I can lift that extra weight or whatever. I was like, man, if anything, this is my telltale to say, this is time for you to walk away because your mind was somewhere else and it made you happy and you're smiling right now. And 3 days later, I got cut. And I remember Ron Rivera, the coach, well, I think he's a former coach of the Washington Commanders now. When you get cut, it's a very somber feeling in the room. Like, the other coaches, they're like, sorry, Spencer, really loves you, blah, blah, blah. I walked in there like, getting cut. Okay, well, you guys go win the championship. Best of luck. Who do I talk to about getting my flight back home? All right? See you guys later. And the only way I could walk into that room is because I knew something else was going to bring me joy once I retired. So that's my little sort of walking away from the NFL. And when I knew, it was a feeling inside that said, you're going to be okay if you take that leap of faith. Because one, I had did the work to put myself in that position to take that leap of faith. A lot of people believe taking a leap of faith is you doing one thing and also making a left turn and sprinting and jumping off of that cliff. When really a leap of faith comes from a series of decisions that have led you to that moment to be able to take that leap of faith. So, yeah, that's my sort of retirement from the NFL story. That is why I knew I would be okay if I walked away.
I think we have room for about 1 or 2 more questions.
I know you talked a bit at the beginning about when you got to Beverly Hills, how you kind of branched out past your own racial identity. How do you think the community you surrounded yourself with changed your perspective?
I would say both because it was sort of the same experience both in high school and in college, like being in various size pools and understanding like I can swim no matter what, no matter how deep the depth. For Beverly, it was understanding that these people do not look like me, these people don't understand my background, these people have only seen my culture on TV in a very specific yet small lens. Now, did I put it on my back to like try to dispel every cultural rumor or whatever? Like, no, that's not my job to do that. It's my job to be myself in these positions, and my friends help kind of sort of change the perspective of me and my people by how I carry myself, by how I act, by how I talk, and just how I am a friend to people. I think one of the things that it helped change was, again, just understanding that we're just not really our skin color. I think it's rather lazy to rely on skin color to just inform every decision about a person. So at 13 years old, it allowed me to understand, like, knowing what Rosh Hashanah is, knowing what Ramadan is, respecting, those holidays, respecting them also because I got extra days off where my friends in South Central and Inglewood did not, So it's just like understanding their culture, not necessarily having to immerse myself in it, but just understanding it enough to where I can have a conversation about it, and I can allow myself to not be the center of attention in any room at any given time because I'm the black guy in the room. Being able to just be in a room as myself and of myself, and allowing that to reign true. Now, when I got to Oregon, it was more so, I've already had that fish out of water experience. This is sort of the big leagues now. Now I'm going to try to use this to my advantage. Now I'm going to try to get into just other cultures and societies and businesses and using being the black guy in a predominantly white space as sort of an entry point for just information. When you play college football and specifically even D1, there's 100 players on that team, 100 plus even. So it's very easy for you to click up and be your own little fraternity and not branch out. But if I was at Eugene, Oregon if I was in Eugene, Oregon for 4 to 5 years and I was only hanging out with the football team, I missed a massive opportunity to learn of a different way of living in the Pacific Northwest that's categorically different from being in South Central. So it's just putting myself out there, being part of different clubs, being cool with some of the fraternities and sororities, and forcing myself to cultivate friendships outside of what I already knew, because that's comfortable. That's just extremely comfortable. And some of those friends I took that leap of faith with so many years ago, like, were in my wedding. I can still talk to the day. And, it's a lot of stuff that's happening in Israel and Palestine right now. I'm having, like, very real, hard conversations with friends that believe both sides, various sides of that discussion. And if I did not have that experience going to Beverly and being able to cultivate those friendships for almost 20 years now, I wouldn't be able to have some of these hard conversations that I'm having with them and I can have those hard conversations with them because they know my heart is not just coming in and attacking them out of nowhere. They know where we've been and what we've done together. So if I say, yo, you guys are crazy if you think this is not a genocide or apartheid, whatever, they're like, well, let me actually listen to what you're saying, because I know you're not here to just attack me like the world is attacking them right now. So just allow me insight more than anything.
Thank you.
We have a hand
We
over
got-
here.
There's
And
one back there too.
okay, so these two will be our last two questions for the night.
First, thanks for the talk. Second, what are your thoughts on how Black people are portrayed in media? What are you happy about and not happy about? And then also the same question for other racial groups, other minority groups.
Yeah, I think we've taken tremendous leaps in how Black people are portrayed. We're allowed to have nuance in our stories now. I think the next step is ownership of those ideas, or a bigger part of the pie and the ownership of those ideas, of not having to pitch our stories to executives that don't look like us, or needing sort of that one producer that doesn't look like us to like grant us that mission to be able to tell our stories. So you have the Kenya Barrises of the world, the Tyler Perrys, the Ava DuVernays, the Will Smiths. Like, these are people that are, whether you agree with whatever stories they're making, they are the ones making those decisions of what stories they get to make. So like, even like Quinta Brunson, who came up through the Vine era, and I've read her book. Like, she's my age. Like, to see her pretty much take sort of the Issa Rae route in building her empire is absolutely fantastic. You know, I think when it comes to what I see the future of it being, it's just allowing people to tell stories that are culturally significant to their people, and not having to look across the line to get something greenlit from somebody else that doesn't look like them. Like, my goal for my production company and just for myself is, you know, I'm shepherding an Asian American story right now based in this very specific area of Los Angeles. And I'm coming into it like, we found the story, but this isn't our story to tell. So let's build the framework around what we think it could be, and now let's go find, you know, Asian screenwriters and producers and people to like actually pump this up. You know, All American Homecoming, you look at that writer's room and the producers, a lot of them came from HBCUs, because you just can't recreate the HBCU experience without having people that came from that world in it. So it's just giving people the space to create without needing sort of the green light from people that don't look like them, which I think we're getting to, but there's still a lot more to go, a lot more way to go.
Another question over here.
Hello. Thank you for coming here to speak with us. I guess my question to you is, like, how do you stay grounded in where you're from and your truth and experience while having gone through this upward moving trajectory in life? Like, I imagine that there's some sort of like mental transition that you go through, and that many of us in this room will go through as we like transition from being children of parents who maybe didn't go to college, and now we're possessing like degrees and whatnot. And
Yeah.
I'll even extend that to, how do you, like you mentioned you're a father, how do you pass that on to your kids in the next generation?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's an amazing question to end on. I think for me, it kind of plays a factor as like being a creative as well, that like I'm constantly seeking ways that I can sort of like break myself down creatively. I don't ever want to be on autopilot. I want to feel, I want to understand, I want to cry, I want to laugh, I want to like have a very human experience throughout this entire thing. I think in the ways that I'm attempting to like ground myself is, I'm in therapy. Like, I have therapy. I'm in marriage counseling, and I'm in marriage counseling when like effectively nothing's really wrong. You know, it's more communication. It's finding different ways to love each other. It's exploring each other. It's realizing that, you know, especially between me and my wife, like, I've known her since I was 14 years old. She was 13. You know, we were friends for the first 10 years of our life. You know, we got married. We're in year 8 right now, and we are not the same people we were when we got married. So I think it's just avoiding autopilot and keeping things fresh, and telling her like, hey, like, we're going out to dinner tonight. Can you get the babysitter? Like, things like that, you know, and even creatively, like forcing myself to talk about some of the tough things in therapy. You know, forcing whether she's comfortable with it, well, if she's comfortable with it, forcing myself to talk about, my wife to talk about things that she's sort of brushed underneath and really peeling it back, because the deeper you can go into yourself, into who you are, into how you want to be in this world, and how you want the world to receive you, that's where the grace and love and power is. So it's constantly making sure that I'm assessing who I am in this world, but for me, not necessarily for a product I'm attempting to put out. It's, am I waking up today being my authentic self? Some days you're not going to be. Some days you got to put on the face. You got to put on the face. Like, let's be real. But other days it's like, am I happy going to bed that night knowing I did my best at the job at hand? Knowing did I break myself down a little bit? Did I cry when I was supposed to cry? Did that story touch me? Did I read that book? Did I meditate today? Did I do yoga today? Like, it's a constant ebb and flow of just exploration. And I'm just scared of going on autopilot. Like some of the biggest issues, and both career and personal and whatever, have all come from opportunities that I knew when they were presented to me, I should have said no. But I was going after a play and not taking that breath and thinking, like, do I really want to do this? We all have that inner voice. Like, we all have that inner voice that, to me, is attuned to a higher power, no matter what you want to believe or whatever spirit you want to believe in, it is attuned to that higher power. And if you are presented with an opportunity or a question, if you close your eyes, take that breath, and feel the right answer, that inner voice is not going to lie to you. And I never want to get so far away from that inner voice being on autopilot that I can't hear it.
Thank you for your answer.
My bad. Also, and how I do that with my kids is, kids are going to have trauma. Like every kid, you guys all have your own various traumas in this room. I understand it. It's an automatic that the human experience comes with some form of trauma. It's not allowing the generational traumas that have affected us to be handed off to our kids. So I often catch myself, even in the ways that I talk to my kids. You know, I have a 4-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. I talk to them differently. You know, it's constantly assessing, did that message get all the way through? When do I push? When do I pull? You know, and it's even in the idea of understanding how I'm parenting them and how I want to parent them. That also leads me to therapy as well. But getting off of the hill of, I'm trying to remove trauma from my kid's life, and understanding you're going to have something. Everybody's going to have something. I'm just making sure the stuff that my dad and my mom put onto me, I'm not putting onto them, and allowing them a clean slate to discover themselves.
All right. Thank you for answering. I did not mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
And thank you for the amazing last question and all the questions that the audience asked. Taylor is going to give our closing remarks, and that will be the conclusion of our event.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to take the time to thank every